Hello and welcome to Life Unrestricted. I'm your host, Dr. Al Cobb. I'm a board-certified chiropractor and concussion rehab enthusiast in Lubbock, Texas. This podcast is devoted to helping you explore life and health in all of its many facets so that you can live a life that's truly unrestricted. All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in again to another episode of Life Unrestricted. This is part 4 of our Brain Injury Awareness Month. And today I have with me Mr. Tim Siegel. He is a dad and he runs a nonprofit, and he is really involved with the traumatic brain injury space. Mr. Siegel, if you would, just give us an idea of who you are, give us a little bit of your story and what you're up to.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was the tennis coach at Texas Tech for 23 years and decided that I wanted to spend more time with my young children. At the time, I had an older daughter from a previous marriage and then a 12-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old daughter, and a 9-year-old son. And 20 days after I resigned from Texas Tech, I received a phone call that no dad ever wants to receive. On July 28th of 2015, my son was at a friend's house, my son Luke, and he was 9 years old, and he was in a golf cart accident. And at the time, I was rushed over to the scene of the accident, and firemen told me to get to the hospital. And we were told, I don't know how many minutes later, that my son suffered head and chest trauma, that the golf cart landed on top of his chest, and he suffered an anoxic brain injury and was in cardiac arrest for 7 minutes. And so that was obviously a shock to us all. We spent 44 days at UMC in Lubbock, multiple surgeries later, and then we were airlifted to Cook Children's Hospital in Fort Worth, where we spent 4 months, and eventually came home on September 6th of 2016. But I remember the doctor at Cook Children told us that based on Luke's MRI, that he would never use his limbs, use his voice, and should never open his eyes. Eventually, he did all three. And, we did a number of therapies from PT, OT, speech to some different alternative therapies such as stem cell, laser therapy, and hyperbaric oxygen. But I feel like Luke's greatest therapy that he received was the love from his family, and I became Luke's primary caregiver for the next 6 years, and I was able to see some significant progress. So, I'm certainly a father that's been there. My son eventually got COVID in 2021 and passed away on August 19th of 2021. And, as difficult as this is for me to even talk about, I know that we're helping families every day with our nonprofit team, Look Hope for Minds.
Yeah, that's got to be such a crazy journey to go on. And just like most people that probably help out the most, you've taken that energy and pushed it towards helping others in the community as well. How did you get involved with that side of things?
My partner, Rhonda Johnson, had a nonprofit called Hope for Minds. Mine was called Team Luke. We merged in 2017, and beginning in 2018, we formed Team Luke Hope for Minds. She had her nonprofit because a friend of hers' son had a non-fatal drowning. And our nonprofit now is really the largest in the country in what we do. We help families financially through education. We have support groups online. And our most important 2 days of the year is at the end of October. And we have our Making Connections Pediatric Brain Injury Conference. Last year, we had 160 families come from 24 states. We've actually granted and helped families and a number of different ways over $2 million in the last 4 years. So, we're keeping busy. We're trying to help families all over America. We're in 47 states. And, I always thought that Luke was going to speak, but he is speaking. He's just speaking through me. And the fact that we're helping so many families is both, it's heartbreaking that so many families need our help, but it's also heartwarming that we're able to do that. In the first 2 months of this year, 80 families reached out to us needing our assistance. So, it's incredibly, it's overwhelming how many families need our help and how many families go through the unthinkable each and every day.
And you mentioned that that you had kind of adult to young children as well, older than Luke. So there's a family aspect. And you also mentioned that there was probably the biggest impact that was had on his healing journey was the love and support given to him by his immediate family. What does it look like to support families through that time period? What are the biggest things that are needs? What do most families really look for?
Well, in our case, there was no blueprint for what to do next. And so that's what we're here to help families that to navigate because, what kind of therapies can I do? Is insurance covering any of this? What is it going to be like at home with renovations? And in our case, we had a home where we're able to navigate. We're just a one story house, but we had a lot of changes in our life, of course, from our daughters, who's now their brother was never going to be the same. Luke was nonverbal. Luke was needing medicine regularly. I became Luke's night nurse most of the nights. I gave meds, turned him. We did therapies every single day in Lubbock, but I think what families need is they need a support system. They need family, yes, but they need friends there to help them, whether it's to help maybe navigate getting to therapies, but also just being there for families. Because for me, I never really, I never felt like I grieved Luke's accident because I was so focused on making sure that Luke was getting well. But at the same time, you know, I would always suggest to families and to parents, which is what I do a lot. I have a podcast that's called Tuesdays with Tim, and I interview parents a lot. And I always remind parents, get enough sleep, make sure you have enough help, and exercise and get your mind and your body going. And I can say that because I didn't really do that in the beginning,
Mm,
really for the first few years. And I know now how important sleep is. I know how important it is to be energized so that I can take care of myself and then eventually take care of Luke. But it's a juggling act for sure because you're dealing with so much unknown, number one, and number two, you still have siblings. Luke's siblings needed me and my wife too, and so it was not easy, and it's a 24-hour a day, 7 days a week challenge.
mhm,
But I just was so convinced that Luke was going to get better because I treated Luke as if he understood me, and it wasn't until I think maybe the 15th month or maybe the 16th month after the accident that being from New Orleans, I'm a big Saints fan, and I said to Luke, move your tongue if you think the Saints are going to win. He began to move his tongue. And
mm,
at that point, I knew Luke was in there. And, the fact that we had a globally damaged brain, I'm dealing almost every day with parents. Today, I've actually visited with a dad and then a couple, and both families had children with brain injuries. And I just know that their children will improve somewhat, at least because of the love of the families. And the name of our nonprofit is called Team Luke Hope for Minds, and that key word is hope, giving families some hope out there because everybody's clinging to hope.
mhm. Absolutely. And also, based off of the people that I've taken care of in the past as well, the brain might be injured, but like what you experienced, the mind is still active and aware. And that's probably the biggest hope that I've seen because we think that the brain controls everything, but there's also something that controls the brain as well. And we would call it the mind or the conscience or the conscious or whatever you want to really call it. But I've seen that as well. And people have told me to keep on these things and make sure that people are aware that you're taking care of people that might have a setback, but there's still something going for them. And that's the fact that they've got people in their life and they've got a body that is always trying to heal and adapt, and it will find ways to do it.
I was always convinced that the brain can rewire, the brain can I was just so certain that Luke was going to make some progress. And I've never told any parent what they should do. I just let them know what we did. And the
Mm,
therapies were important, and I talked to Luke as if he understood and wanted his friends to be around him and wanted to interact. And Luke did make some significant progress. by the end, I believe he made the most progress in year 6. And most doctors will tell you that's not the case. And so, I've experienced that. And so I'm just so grateful that Luke made progress, that Luke understood me, and that Luke now has inspired and impacted so many people all over the country because of our nonprofit that is basically bearing his name.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You mentioned as well just the mentality that you had. Did you feel like you were unique in that aspect? Did you feel like, I mean, obviously, most parents will do anything and spend any amount of time, resources, or energy to be able to find solutions. Do you think that is a unique thing that you did, or do you think parents are always looking for this and they can't really find the solutions, so they're stuck in a limbo of sorts?
Well, I think I was blessed in the sense that, when I left Texas Tech to coach middle school and high school, I really didn't have the opportunity to do much of that coaching because I was with my son. So
Mhm.
I became the caregiver, and most dads, obviously, I would say more than most, probably 99% of the dads are having to work. And
Mhm.
because what you see so often is when there's a child with a brain injury, one parent and maybe sometimes both have to quit their jobs to take care of their son or their daughter. I was able to be there for Luke all the time. And that's where I guess you could say my situation is unique, that I
Mhm.
was able to be at his bedside and at therapies 24 hours a day. Um, but I think that it's so important that to look into, and that's what Team Luke does. We provide, we have 7 on staff, from grant writers to social workers to director of ops to event person. We have a big staff, and our social workers talk to families and help them navigate through insurances and through different therapies they could look into. Because, as I said, I didn't know the first thing about brain injuries,
Mhm.
and even what we should do next. And so I'm just, that's where Team Luke is here for families, because we, even the greatest neurosurgeon neurologist in America can only predict their child's or their patient's outcome based on an MRI and experience. But
Mhm.
every brain is different. And Luke made progress that we were told he was not going to make. And we have seen that now from other families throughout. Some a positive and some maybe not the progress that parents want. But it is such a difficult process, because when you have an injury, whether it's a knee injury or whatever, in X amount of weeks you will get better. When it
Mhm.
comes to a brain injury, as you know, we just don't know how much progress can be made. Um, Luke made progress that we were told he was not going to make. And you can't have a more globally damaged brain than what Luke had. And yet he made significant changes, from his strength to his head control to his responses with tongue movement, to making sounds. I would say, Luke, I love you. And he would say, he was talking to me.
Mhm.
And so I'm just, I feel in my heart of hearts that God could have taken Luke day 1, day 8. But I think that we have this nonprofit because Luke lived for the next 6 years. And now, because of Luke, we have a nonprofit that's nationally well known, that we are reaching families each and every day in so many different ways.
Mhm. And because of that, the impact is just exponential.
Mm. Yes.
Have have You mentioned also that you just recently released a documentary. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, this documentary has been in the works since last fall, and it was filmed. Most of it was filmed at our conference, our pediatric brain injury conference, which is in Austin every year. And so, in this documentary, which is, by the way, it's on YouTube, and it's called "Hope Beyond the Diagnosis," Team Luke
Mhm.
Hope for Minds, and we interview families. Dr. Phil has a segment that he agreed to be on. We have a celebrity segment where Patrick Mahomes is on there, where he wears the Team Luke Hope for Minds bracelet. We have Drew Brees, Luke's hero, is on there. the tennis world. I played professional tennis, and so I know a lot of the people that were on there. But really, it's about my story and how Luke had this accident and what we've done with it. But most importantly, it shows how Team Luke Hope for Minds helps families each and every day. Families that are interviewed and telling the world how the impact that we've made on them and how we've helped them in a variety of different ways. And so it's really special. I think it was incredibly well done. And I hope been well received. It came out this month. Of course, March is Brain Injury Awareness Month.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's so special on there as well is that Joey McGuire, Texas Tech football coach, does not give out the number 3 anymore. My son's favorite number is 3, and he gives that number now to the hardest worker and the greatest fighter. They have to earn that number. And that was just a new person was just announced a couple of days ago, and that's on the documentary as well. So it's very special. It's very heartwarming. It's also very heartbreaking as well, even for me to watch it, to see that Drew Brees is talking to my son, to share what happened the morning that Luke passed away. It was tough to watch, even for me to watch. So I know how difficult it can be for others, but I also know
Mm-hmm.
that it's very impactful and very informative and a lot of education.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got it on my docket to watch by the end of the month just to be able to take part in that. And if you're listening, you can find the link to the YouTube video. I'll put it down in the description of this video, and you can be able to find it and click directly to it right after this. If you wouldn't mind, what were some, you mentioned you did a lot of different things, and I think that's brilliant because the brain responds to a bunch of different input in a really brilliant way. What were some of the things that you as a parent said, I think we should seek this out, and I think it would be very beneficial? What were some of those things you mentioned, whether it was body work or probably nutrition or supplementation alongside of it?
Well, you know, I try to do as much research, and my wife is a nurse practitioner, so she was in the medical
Mhm.
world. But I just tried to learn as much as I could and talk to doctors and talk to therapists and just pick people's brains. And I know nutrition is extremely important. And I also know this, that when a child has a brain injury, keeping Luke in the wheelchair or keeping Luke in bed was not going to maximize his potential. So we were upright a lot. We were on on the local mat, which is a robotic machine where Luke was upright and moving, and that movement is so important. We had standers. We did acupuncture. We did stem cell, laser therapy, hyperoxygen. We did a lot. We did
Mhm.
1 week intensives, um, and I think part of it is that I'm a coach and a dad, and so I pushed Luke. Luke was an incredible little baseball player. He was a competitor. And I do believe that part of Luke's improvement came from the fact that he was tough. He was a fighter. And I always tell people 3 words: fight like Luke. And, I do a lot of public speaking as well. And my message, I have what's called 7 inspirations from Luke. Number 1 is to find your passion. Number 2 is don't ever quit. 3 is to lean on friends and family. 4 is to make good choices, be careful. 5 is to have faith. 6 is to find forgiveness. And 7 is to let a loved one's legacy live on through you. And I speak a lot so far this year, I've spoken to 12 college tennis teams because everybody at some point, one of those 7, if not all 7, will make an impact or affect you. And I talk a lot about forgiveness. It took me 8 years to forgive. And I was carrying that for a long time, and that was unhealthy. And I also learned how important it was for me, to take care of me in a lot of ways. And the anger and the bitterness, had to get rid of that. And so I think as a father or a parent, when you hold on to guilt or anger, it's not going to help your child get better. It took me a long time to figure that out, and that's certainly something that I can now share with other families.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a lot about um, just the aspect of taking care of yourself. That's I talk a lot about that with other providers because we're taking hands-on care with people, but those people don't go home with us. They go live their own life, and other people are taking care of them, or there's something else going on where they have an arrangement. But for parents, I think you hit the nail right on the head, and you experienced it as well, that to take care of yourself is taking care of your loved one as well, because then you can give them the best. And that goes for anybody that's in that space or anybody that's a provider, but particularly those who are, like in your case, 24/7, being able to provide for the people that you need to.
There were times when I was tired, but I never felt tired because I was focused on trying to help him and also be there for my daughters and for my wife. But it
Hmm.
was impossible to be 100% for everyone. But
Hmm.
now that I have gotten sleep and now that I am exercising, it's apparent how much I needed it back then. And I'm wired a little bit differently. I can live with no sleep. I think about this a lot, but do you know for 6 years I never had a full night of sleep?
Mm.
Not one. And my son passed away 3.5 years ago, and I can't sleep without some help. I take a trazodone every night because my mind wanders so much about Luke and about Team Luke. And so hopefully, at some point that will not be needed. But I know that my heart rate for years never got up. I walk a lot, which has been very helpful and very beneficial. But lately, by getting back on the tennis court and getting my heart rate up has been really good for me. The last thing Luke and I ever did was play tennis. And so for 9 years, I couldn't get near a tennis court. It reminded me too
Mm.
much of Luke. And since I've been in Dallas the last 10 months, I'm back on a tennis court. And I think it's been good therapy for me and
Mhm.
good for me physically and emotionally.
Yeah, to have some passions that are outliving some of the other things that you went through as well. It's been good, I'm sure. What the last question I feel like I want to ask you is, how has going through this, what has it done to shape you as the man you are today?
Well, one thing it's done is it made me realize that I needed help, that I could not do this alone. Um, I have a tremendous relationship with my ex-wife now, Jenny. I hate the fact that there's the statistic is pretty high. I think it's 89% of all marriages fail when you lose a child. But we get along extremely well. We have two beautiful daughters, and Luke is right here in my heart. And I have a beautiful daughter from a previous marriage. But I think for me, it's you can't do this by yourself. You need friends, you need family, you need professional help. I needed a professional help. Seeing a therapist myself. I always thought I could do things kind of, oh, I could handle this. And I learned really I couldn't do this by myself. And now looking back, there are regrets, certainly. Wanting to be more there for my daughters and for my wife. But I did the best that I could while trying to take care of my son. I had a little athlete. I had a hero. I had the greatest little boy that any father could ever want. And then suddenly he has an accident where it's never going to be the same. 6 years later, um, my son passed away. And so it's been 3.5 years, but a lot of times it feels like it's been 3.5 weeks.
Hmm.
Um, I I lean on my faith in God. I couldn't do this without my faith. Um, so that's a very important part of my survival.
Hmm.
And I just have to lean on my friends and my family. I'm very passionate about that. And we have outside of this world. Um, I'm a big sports fan, and I try to go to Texas Ranger games, New Orleans Saints games with my daughters. I
Hmm.
try to keep sports in my life. Texas Tech athletics is a big part of my life, and so I think it's very important to have. At the time, I used to think it was distractions, but instead, really, it's not distractions. It's just something else for me, what I can do for me. And I'm just proud now that Team Look Out for Minds can be there to help parents. I have a dad
Hmm.
support group that I'm able to share my experiences with my fellow peers. You could say. I've written two books. One was called "It's in God's Hand." The second one is called "Fight Like Luke: Transforming Grief into Love, Strength, and Faith." And maybe just maybe there'll be a third and final chapter, a third book, and that book would be about how I've healed.
Mm.
And I've healed in so many ways, but forgiveness, my faith, letting go of anger and bitterness. You know, I think about my son, you know, I would say almost every minute of every day, but I no longer have that anger. And as difficult as it is to lose a son, and I've heard so many people say, Tim, I can't imagine. And a lot of times my response is, neither can I, and I'm living it. Um, it's just not something that you ever prepare for. And I have three amazing daughters, and to think that my little boy, my little sweet, caring, sensitive, selfless little boy, passed away from an accident that didn't need to happen. My message to parents is to be careful. Golf carts is just one of the things that we see a lot, but I see so many families allow children to drive golf carts unsupervised on a city street and without a helmet, and that just should never happen. It's just taking precaution, and it's about safety, whether it's from in a pool, on an ATV or golf cart, accidents at home. These happen every single day. Every 9 seconds, there's a brain injury, and
Mm,
I'm just here to provide some hope for families through education, and I know that I'm the executive director of this nonprofit, and I'm doing this for families, but I'm doing this for and with my son as well.
mm, amazing. Well, how can we get involved if there's someone that's listening to this? How can they get involved with you and for Team Luke? How can they get involved to find those resources and start joining in on the story?
We have a website called teamlukehopeforminds.org. On Facebook, you can follow our personal story. It's called Luke's Legacy. Pray for Luke Siegel, and also Team Luke Hope for Minds on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And then you can Google Luke Siegel and ESPN. There's a story about us called "A Father, a Son, and Their Saints." I think just sharing this information on your social media and going to YouTube to watch our documentary, I think will be the most positive thing that you can do and
Hmm.
people can do to help. Donating, because we're always trying to raise money to help families. Every little dime helps. And certainly in March, Brain Injury Awareness Month will be the perfect time to do that. And we've got events coming up in April 4th. Diamond Rio is coming to Lubbock for the Texas Tech basketball arena, the
Mm,
United Supermarkets Arena. We have a lot of different events, so I'm really looking forward to seeing how many families we can help this year.
absolutely. Is all of the resources that Tim just listed will be in the show notes, in the bio description, wherever you're finding this information, and you'll be able to go directly to those sources. Tim, is there anything else that you'd like to leave with?
I just want to thank you and thank the Lubbock community and
Mm,
really nationally. Wherever I go, people come up to me, "You're Luke's dad. I follow your story, and you're making an impact on my son and my family." And as difficult as this is every single day for me, I do take comfort knowing that my son has inspired and continues to make an impact.
absolutely, and there's no doubt about that. Mr. Siegel, thank you so much for coming on. And if anyone would like to connect with us, I can connect you if you have any need, have any resource that you would like to be shared. Please reach out to either myself or Mr. Siegel, and we would love to serve you in any way possible. Thank you again for coming on, and share this with someone that you think it could help, because we want to, just like Luke's story is, we want to have this continue to ripple effect and help people in need.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Hey, thank you so much for listening. If you have been impacted by this journey that we've been on for Brain Injury Awareness Month, I think you would absolutely love to go back and listen to the previous podcast episodes or YouTube episodes that we've done. We've got one or two more episodes that will be coming out early in April, and I would love for you to take part in sharing the story to be able to help people who are hurting or lacking information or education on some of these topics to get the help that they need. As always, you can go down in the show notes and find all of the information for today. And I hope that this blesses you. That's the best way that you can play a part in getting these resources out to people who need it. You guys have a blessed one.